and heart. Radhe Radhe. I have a very special reading for you all today. Today we are starting a book called Roar of the Ganges. This is a book written by another Swami, Swami Tadatmanandaji, and this is the guru of one of our Sangis, Sky Guardian, who has graciously offered to send one of his books my way for us to read in the Sangha with the blessings of his guru. So, without further ado, we'll start with the back of it. This is a fascinating story of the transformation of a young, successful American computer engineer into a Hindu sannyasi and a teacher of Vedanta. This book provides a real flavor of ashram life in the Himalayas, along with interesting character sketches of seekers and sadhus. Skillfully woven into this tale are some of the most important teachings of Vedanta. The clarity of the author's vision and his personal writing style easily lead to penetrating insights into a subject usually considered mystifying and inaccessible. A valuable introduction to Vedanta that unfolds the wisdom of the ancient sages in a contemporary manner without compromising its profound traditional contents. Another quote, he talks about the lifestyle in the ashrams in Rishikesh, his interaction with Swami Dayananda, and his discussions with the inmates of ashrams. His expression on the teachings of our scriptures are clear. It is really interesting to learn the experiences of the author. From the Hindu. And one more quote on the back. It is fascinating to read about his intense spiritual life and to see complex Vedantic doctrines being expressed in simple language which appeals to our reason. From the Indian Review of Books. Hello, Small. Sky Guardian was even nice enough to get it signed by Swami Tadatmanandaji, which, if I can read his handwriting, says, "With prayer and best wishes." Some acknowledgements to his guru, Pujya Swami Dayananda, many friends, his students, and his editor. And there's a little preface to the revised edition, sharing how this book is finally being reprinted, and that this book was originally written as his humble attempt to present the teachings of Vedanta in a compelling and accessible manner. Instead of writing a heavy philosophical treatise few would enjoy, I attempted to weave the central teachings of Vedanta into an interesting story. The story of a young American who immersed himself in the ancient Hindu traditions and was profoundly transformed. That story, of course, is my story. Telling my personal story also gave me the opportunity to share insights gleaned from experience throughout my life, especially during my spiritual journey from its muddled beginnings in the late 1970s up to my initiation as a sannyasi, Hindu monk, in 1993. I included other insights about sannyasa and life in the ashrams of Rishikesh for those unique individuals totally committed to a spiritual lifestyle. Alright, without further ado, for real, here's an introduction, and we get a little hand-drawn depiction of where I assume this story takes place. Here on the banks of the river Ganges, also known as the Ganga. Naked, I stood in the Ganges' frigid waters as dark clouds shrouding the Himalayas unleashed their fury. Gusts of wind ripped the pre-dawn sky and stung my skin with needles of rain. But I was oblivious to the elements. I could only sense the tremendous consequence of this moment. I had not eaten or slept since yesterday morning, when 3 Hindu priests arrived to guide me through hours of preparatory rituals. I had spent the entire night intoning mantras and tending a sacrificial fire. After its hungry tongues of flame consumed my final oblations of ghee, I marched to the river and immersed myself in its sacred waters as a final act of purification. Now the preparations were complete. Time itself stood frozen, bearing witness as I recited ancient Sanskrit vows by which I renounced everything, giving up my former life forever. The Ganges roared in approval. Previously, I enjoyed a 6-figure income from a computer consulting firm and lived in a beautiful California home overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And now, after years of rigorous training in meditation, Sanskrit, and the canonical scriptures of Hinduism, I was ordained a monk in India's most traditional monastic order. As dramatic as it may seem, this transformation was neither sudden nor unexpected. It was the inexorable result of a spiritual journey, a journey of inquiry and of discovery. My spiritual quest had led me in 2 directions. First, it led me within to explore inner dimensions of my own being. There, I encountered hidden fears, self-doubt, selfishness, ego, aspects of myself I had always been reluctant to face. These subtle adversaries seemed like hideous, distorted reflections one might see in an amusement park's house of mirrors. I learned to embrace these inner demons and bring them along on my journey so they could be healed. Eventually, I was led to discover a deeper dimension of myself, a realm overflowing with love, gratitude, and joy. I felt as if I had arrived at a verdant mountain retreat after driving for days through urban sprawl and scorched prairies. The other aspect of my journey, the outer dimension, led me around the hemisphere to the subcontinent of India. I found its spiritual landscape inhabited by a bewildering mosaic of people. I met learned scholars in remote hermitage who taught disciples devoted to unraveling the mysteries of life. I visited cave-dwelling yogis who passed their days exploring the depths of meditation. I listened to Brahmin priests chant Sanskrit mantras in temples where their ancestors had worshipped for generations. I walked alongside saffron-robed monks who wandered the countryside, living on alms. I learned that these men and women are part of a spiritual subculture that is anything but monolithic. Their lifestyles span the extremes, from uncompromising asceticism to lavish urbanity. Some dress in elegant robes, some in rags. Some roam the Himalayas sky-clad, clothed only with the 4 directions. As it is said, their naked bodies smeared with sacred ash. they belong to numerous sects and lineages, or follow paths of their own creation, rejecting all traditions. I should not have been surprised to learn that their spiritual practices are as diverse as their frequently eccentric personalities. I found that the members of this spiritual subculture occupy a vast ideological landscape. They themselves often say, "We seek one truth, but follow many paths. We believe in one God, but worship God in many forms." So it is inevitable that they espouse a broad range of philosophies, religious beliefs, and spiritual teachings. These are the ingredients of the eclectic spiritual stew found throughout modern India, a concoction that includes lofty metaphysical theories, archaic superstitions, sectarian dogmas, and universal truths. It is hard to imagine a more diverse mixture. And hello G, hello Nani, and hello Mihai. These dissimilar elements are usually lumped together and designated by the familiar term Hinduism. For this reason, Hinduism is unlike most religions, which are generally based on specific doctrines embraced by all followers. But even though the word Hinduism does not designate a particular doctrine, it is still a meaningful and useful label if we keep in mind the complex entity it represents. What distinguishes this amalgamation as being Hindu is that it all evolved from a single source, the Vedic scriptures of ancient India. Thousands of years before the advent of Buddha, Christ, and the Prophet of Islam, sages meditating in Himalayan caves and in huts on the banks of sacred rivers expressed their exalted discoveries in mystical Sanskrit verses. Their works were passed down through the generations by a tradition of oral recitation. Eventually, this material was compiled to form the Vedas, considered by most scholars to be the world's oldest scriptures. The Vedas were chanted for many centuries before finally being written down on palm leaves in comparatively recent times. These scriptures became seeds of inspiration for the wide range of religious, philosophical, and spiritual teachings found in India's spiritual stew. To develop this metaphor further, consider a recipe passed along from cook to cook. Each will surely adapt the recipe to suit his or her tastes. In a similar way, the Vedas were drawn upon and adapted by generations of teachers according to their own inclinations and according to the needs of their students. Even today, new teachings continue to evolve. Many cast fresh light on the truths enfolded in the mystical poetry of the sages, or explored new territory while remaining firmly based on Vedic principles. Hello, the bearded mystic. You share that Swami Tadatmanandaji is one of your favorite gurus alive today. How lovely is that? Thank you for sharing. Among all these emergent teachings, some fail to embody the profundity of the Vedas. Consider again a recipe that gets adapted. Some variations will be delightful, whereas others turn out to be insipid or unpalatable, depending on the skill of each cook. In a similar way, some teachers have unwittingly garbled the message of the sages. At best, the result of such distortions is a loss of clarity. At worst, the result is a gross corruption in which the teachings are robbed of their capacity to convey the vision of the sages. Thank you, Jas. Hello, Steve. Such was the complexity of the spiritual world into which I had so naively stepped. I had entered a vast spiritual marketplace whose astonishing variety of goods overwhelmed me. It seemed like the buzzing confusion of a typical Indian bazaar. A narrow lane choked with shoppers, bicycles, scooters, and crows. Tiny shops and vending carts clustered together, luring shoppers with enticing displays of colorful wares. And from all directions, the piercing, nasal voices of merchants touting their daily bargains. Bananas, 4 rupees a dozen. Sandals, highest quality sandals. In those chaotic conditions, I found it difficult to distinguish a real bargain from a sham. To avoid second-rate merchandise, shoppers in the bazaar must be alert and knowledgeable. I discovered that the spiritual marketplace is no different. Everything there is not equally worthy of pursuit. Seekers, faced with a staggering array of choices, are left to exercise their own discretion. They must distinguish between authentic teachers and self-styled wise men. They must differentiate ancient traditions from modern hodgepodges that dilute and distort the message of the sages. And above all, they must avoid scam artists and hypocrites with selfish motives. Spiritual seekers would be well advised to heed the dictum, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. All right, why don't we pause our reading of this wonderful book there. I thank Sky Guardian again for this wonderful gift, not just to me, but for our Sangha. I am sure that it will serve us all well. So I thank you everyone for listening with me. What a great poetic introduction into general spiritual environment of India and the many traditions that are diverse and yet unified. Dansuela, you share that the book has such rich imagery. It's beautiful. I'm happy that you saw that too.